So that my title was Microplastics in EU Policy, but actually my presentation is a bit narrower because we don't take care of the EU policy at the European Chemicals Agency, but we do propose restrictions on microplastics. And how to move to the next. Okay, first, before I go to microplastics, I just want to say a few words about ECHA and what we are. We are one of the decentralized EU agencies like the European Food Safety Authority and the Medicines Agency. And we were set up in 2007 to manage 2 European chemicals regulations. And we're located in Helsinki, Finland. And you can see here our beautiful new, it's a 1-year-old new office building, which we had a chance to stay for a couple of months before the pandemic. So it's now empty, and then my home office here close to Helsinki, and we have a very nice winter, a lot of snow and freezing weather. So it might not be the same as what you have there in different parts of Europe. And what do? We protect you and the environment by taking action on harmful chemicals. And as mentioned, we started with 2 regulations, and now we manage principally 4 chemicals laws, but also parts of 4 other regulations, like the Waste Framework Directive as an addition. And then microplastics at EU level, the big picture. There are several actions on microplastics as part of the EU plastic strategy, which was agreed in 2018. And this strategy aims at better design of plastic products and higher recycling rates. And the Single-Use Plastics Directive is one of the initiatives. I think it kicks in already this year with the straws. The plastic straw should be banned, and the Commission is investigating particle loss from tires. That's one initiative. And an action for my employer or my agency was to develop a restriction proposal for microplastics that are intentionally added to products. And this has already been referred to in some of the presentations today. And we did an investigation on this topic, and we submitted a restriction proposal in January 2019. And a few words about restriction under the REACH regulation. The word itself probably brings to mind as the first thing a ban. But a restriction is not necessarily a ban. It can be any condition on manufacture, import, or use. And it tackles the risk that is not currently controlled in the EU. And it can be initiated either by ECHA on request of the Commission or by EU member states. So we as an agency, we don't propose ourselves anything, but we do what the Commission asks us to do. And the restriction process is quite lengthy. I think it takes around a year, even more. And stakeholders are consulted during the process 2 times. There's one longer consultation that lasts for 6 months, and then one shorter consultation. And all the proposals are evaluated by 2 scientific committees. There's one committee that looks at the risks of the chemical or the material. And then the other one looks at the impacts on society. So it's a socio-economic analysis committee. And we as the agency, we don't decide on restrictions. Those are done by the Commission and EU member states. In Brussels, I think nowadays online. Then this has also been discussed quite a lot already. What are microplastics? They're very small solid plastic particles. The secondary microplastics are a result of degradation, wear and tear. And the primary microplastics are deliberately manufactured and added to products like cosmetics, fertilizers, or this soft infill that you see on synthetic sport pitches. And the primary microplastics are what our proposal is trying to tackle. And why do we do this? Why is the EU doing this? The concern is environmental pollution. We estimate that each year around 42,000 tons of microplastics are released into the European environment from these intentional uses. There's a lot more if you count the secondary microplastics as well. The biggest source is the granular infill on the sport pitches, which can be up to 16,000 tons a year. So it's quite a big release. I think second is cosmetics, and I think fertilizers. They're the next biggest releases of microplastics. And as mentioned here already, the problem is that they're very persistent. They're very universal pollutants. Once they are in the environment, they stay there, and they pollute our water, seas, and also our soils, food, and drinking water. And even if you think that the 42,000 tons might not sound that big of a deal, it is big when you think about the growing environmental stock. So it grows every year with 42,000 tons, so it is significant. And as mentioned, the environmental concern of the pollution is the justification for our restriction proposal. We didn't have a look at the impacts on human health. So what did we propose? Basically, we said that we would like to have a ban on products that include microplastics when the microplastics are released from the product when they are used. We use inevitably released in the proposal. So this is what we would like to see banned altogether. Then there are derogations. So derogated uses, for example, for natural polymers, or uses where there's no release, microplastic release. For example, I heard that paint is one of these types of uses where you have microplastics in the paint, but once you put it on the wall, the microplastics kind of integrate into the paint and they form a film. So we consider that this does not lead to microplastic release. And then there are derogations also for uses that are already regulated, for example, like food additives and medicines. But when there's a derogated use, we also require companies to give safe use information. So this is to minimize the use, the release of microplastics, and then we require also companies to report microplastic releases to ECHA, so we can monitor those and they can potentially be regulated in the future. Our proposal includes transitional periods to give companies time to develop alternatives, and it has two options to tackle the granular infill concern. One of them is a ban, I think after 6 years transition, and the other one is the mandatory use of risk management measure like fences and these granular catchers, which prevent the granules from going into the wastewater from the fields. Then the impact of our proposal, we estimate that it would prevent 500,000 tons of releases over 20 years. And the annual emissions could be released by more than 90% after the transition periods have expired. The cost to industry are estimated at 11 or 19 billion, and the wide range depends on what is decided to be included for the granular infill. So what's the risk management option to limit the pollution from the sport pitches?
We need to wrap up. You have
yes,
the one. What's
yes.
it next?
This is the last topic related slide. So our committees finalized their work in December last year, and we are now exactly working hard on to get the administrative parts ready, and we are ready to soon to send our proposal and the committee's evaluation to the Commission. And the Commission then has 3 months time to put forward a proposal to the Member States, and then the Commission and the Member States discuss in the REACH committee. And once they agree, the proposal is then scrutinized by the Council and the Parliament, and finally adopted by the European Commission. This could happen in 2022. So that's it. I still have a few links if you want to have a look. We have a so-called hot topics page on microplastics, and there's also this kind of documentary style video, which you might be interested in.
If you could share that in the chat with all participants, that would be amazing. There's also a question posted to you on the chat. We will take up questions at the end of the session. Now I would like to ask David León from the organization Hombre y Territorio to take the floor. I'm not going to introduce him because we're running out of time, but please go ahead.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much. Not to share the windows, okay. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes, no? Okay. So I'm David León. I'm coming from an NGO of Spain, and we are really happy. We are invited to this forum or this workshop because the NGOs, okay, we don't have a relevant but maybe an important role in all this problem because we can act as a hinge between different sectors of society, including managers, including companies, including academics and population, of course. And I think this project or this issue is of importance because we have the opportunity of change behavior, change the attitude and access to information of different sectors. Huh? So this project is included in a huge project of Libera. It's an organization that is currently acting in Spain to reduce littering and has 3 different axes. One of participation, another one of prevention, and the last of knowledge. And this project of microplastics protocol, we tried to cover these 3 axes. No, the first objective we pointed was to create an adaptive tool, a sampling methodology, but to be suitable for different stakeholders, including technicians, researchers, associations, volunteers, and teachers and academics. And the second objective, complementing the first one, was to sample at least 100 rivers along Spain and to make the first approximation of these projects in Spain and applying the methodology. And in all the actions we have tried and we are currently trying to involve population and involve different sectors. Meanwhile, we are developing the activities. Huh? So we started in 2019. We did an important article and information search, and we did different interviews and collaborations. We have done different tests for the methodology in rivers and stream, also in the laboratory, both for the identification of the different elements of microplastics and for the polymer identification. In the sampling campaign, There was a sampling organized by SEO BirdLife organization in Spain, and within the Spanish National Research Council. They were to sample different contaminants in important bird areas for the biodiversity, the IVAs, and we taught them to collect microplastics with our methodology. Okay, the protocol or the document is actually in Spanish, but we are working with the University of Cork in Ireland with a colleague that is working there for the translation. So I hope in a few weeks that will be translated in English. And if you agree, I can share you through the plastic justice. You can see there are a lot of icons. You have a lot of graphics to understand the problem, to understand which are the main points, which are the main problems, why the secondary plastics, microplastics, and primary microplastic can be a problem for the different species and different ecosystems. And we have seen in the last speeches, and we have structured the protocol, the document, in different steps of a high complexity, and to be adaptable for the different sectors that can be used. It's important to say that the projects and the information we give also in the protocol and in the sampling campaign is focused on those microplastics that have a positive or zero buoyancy. That this is a very important characteristics of plastics, of polymers, because not all of them are floating. No, some of them are the sediment, and this methodology is adapted for those that are floating or in the surface. Okay, so in the protocol, in the methodology, we show how and what materials do you need for sampling in rivers. We give some drafts of field sheets to be adapted for the different projects, and also we show which are the minimal or the requirements you need in a laboratory. For example, if you are a teacher, or maybe if you are working in a natural area, and you want to incorporate this study in your activity of monitoring. Okay, we also give some drafts for the laboratory sheet to show the information you are obtaining of the different samples, and we give a identification guide to make more easier people who want to make an activity to detect which can be and which cannot be microplastics when you are looking them for the first time with a binocular glass, you know. So there are useful information for this. Okay. So, for the last information we give in the project, we have done the third analysis of the microplastic. Will be to peel the onion, you know, and we have decanted for the spectroscopy with infrared radiation, and as you maybe know, it's a very specific technology to detect which are the polymers you are finding on your samples, and you can get the information of what are you finding in your river or in your stream. Okay, I give you some examples because we have made a third analysis with electronic microscopy, and it gives you another point of view of this problem because of some of the issues that, for example, Martin Thiel and Peter and Raymond has told before. For the potential of these elements of transport different contaminants, different invasive species, and because of the chemical materials that they have in the composition that can be of human, can be important for human health. Now you have here a fragment. Okay, when you see in the electronic microscopy, you can see how complex are these fibers or these elements. No, the third one and the last is a sphere. You can see how well, particular are these elements. Okay, I'm finishing. The sampling results for the EVA sampling, we have 150 samples of different rivers in Spain with 76% of presence of microplastic. I have to remember that all of these samples are recorded in protected areas of Spain. Fibers and fragments are the mainly occurrence in number of samples and in number of items for sample. And we have detected about 29 different polymers in the waters of the samples of Spain we have sampling. The awareness on the scope data, we are still working on it, but we have a high scope in television and press. We have made a lot of workshops. We have made thank you. Worked with some scholars, and we have just published an article in a journal. Just finished it. Thank you for your attention, and excuse me for the English and the speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. I'm sorry to cut you short, but we have to move on. So I would like to call Irene Diez from Fundación Ecoalf to the panel, or to present.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, good afternoon. Hi, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. And well, I'm Irene Diez. I'm the general manager of the Ecoalf Foundation. And the Ecoalf Foundation was created from Ecoalf, which is a fashion brand company. It was created, in fact, to launch a project called Upcycling the Oceans. That's the one I'm talking about now. And it's a project which indeed doesn't address directly the microplastics issue, but I think it does in an indirect way, because it tries to clean up the ocean, to give a second life to the plastic recover, and above all to raise awareness about the marine pollution. So I'm trying to share now the screen. Okay, let me know if it works. Yeah?
Yeah, it works.
Okay, perfect. So, okay, so that's the presentation that I talked. The project was born from the from the realization, when we realized that, let me check if it moves. Okay, about the marine litter issue, about the amount of trash that fishermen from the Mediterranean, that it was where it began, were collecting accidentally. The first image you can see top left is something that fishermen collect every day in the Mediterranean area. It also was a mix of things because it was also from the reality that the fashion is the second most polluting industry in the world. And it was also about the third reality that this was that, okay, it can be considered waste from a point of view, but it could be considered a raw material from another point of view. So we wanted to launch a project able to provide, to prove that it's possible to do things with that marine litter, that it should have never been on the seabed, okay, and that there is a lot of things to do upstream. That sometimes we can think that most of the marine litter comes from the maritime activities, but the reality is more than 80% comes from inland, no? So that's how we created Upcycling the Oceans, and these are the phases of the project. So what we do mainly is to work hand in hand with fishermen. Fishermen, mainly trawlers, that collect what fish trash accidentally, okay? So they sort the fish they have collected and the plastics and other kinds of trash that they collect. So we ask them to put it in a small bins they have at in the boat. And then when they arrive at the harbor, they put that trash into a bigger containers that are for this purpose at the harbor. Then we hire a transportation company and a sorting plant, okay, to keep traceability of the litter collected. And then we do the sorting to give it a second life when it's possible. It's not always is possible to do a second life to this marine litter currently, but we try to do our most to recycle. Some of the examples that we do is a collaboration with the textile industry, but not only. Currently, we are trying to close more and more the loop, and we are testing and we are partnered with another entities willing to give a second life to the trash collected, not linked to the textile sector, although the textile was the first pilot in this project. So what we want to do, okay, of course we want to clean up the ocean as far as possible, but to be honest, we are currently, I don't know, collecting about 180 tons of trash per year, which is a big amount, of course, but it doesn't, it's just a drop in the ocean, no, if you compare with the amount of trash that arrive to the ocean every year. But we want to work more and more in prevention. We realize that these kind of projects are not a solution at all, but they can be a good idea. They can be a good awareness tool. They can be a good tool for data collection. These data collections help us to take measures upstreams to avoid the problems. And they are also a good example of what can be done with this trash that shouldn't have been in the ocean, no? So we think that if we promote circular economy, if we show that we can do beautiful things with this material, that it can be with the same quality as the virgin materials, at the end we are preventing littering. So what we have done in Spain during the last 5 years is to collaborate with more than 40 ports with 2,600 fishermen that are working for free. They are volunteers, and they are participating in this project because they want to clean their sea. And we have the opportunity to replicate the project in Thailand during the last 3 years. And currently we are trying to expand the projects into another Mediterranean countries. Currently we are collaborating in Greece with Enaleia. It's a local entity that works with fishermen. So we are collaborating in 13 Greek ports. And last October, we launched our first port in Italy. And nowadays, we are working in France to replicate not only in the Mediterranean area, but also in the Channel, where most of the trawling fleet works. No? So here you've got some main results. Currently, we have 47 ports involved, more than 600 boats, over 2,600 fishermen. But here you have also the numbers about the trash collected so far and the PET recovered and other plastic recovered. But I think it's important to also what we try to do to raise awareness, and it means talks at the schools, workshops at the schools, and that's last step, which is it has been included in the last year, and it has been we have used Mar Nova methodology to work with fishermen and to have good data that can be reported to the government, to the authorities, and it can be reported to Europe. And we hope this will be useful to understand better what is happening in the sea and what can be done. Okay, that's an example of one of the products that can be done with the litter recover, and how we try to work on circular economy, not only from the material point of view that is recycled, but also about the lifespan of the product, about the way we talk about that, how we explain the recommendations about how to extend the lifespan of the project, and the eco design from the beginning, no, from the creation of the product. So what we try to do is to look for partners. So when we look for the expansion, or we try to expand the project into another countries or into another regions, we need partners, of course, no. So what kind of partners we look for? Firstly, the fishing sector is the main character of this initiative, but we also look for another similar initiatives, because about 6 years ago when we began, there were not so many, but fortunately now there are more and more. So we try to find these partners that are already doing something, maybe related to fishing nets, or maybe related to beach cleanups or other things, but that are important, no, to work together. We also try to work with NGOs because of the role they can play with the citizens and with the awareness, and sometimes also with the scientific knowledge, as David told. We look for collaborators. We mean collaborators, entities willing to recycle the marine litter recovery. Okay, we have some of them, but sometimes we miss more entities that's willing to use in their manufacture this kind of material. And of course, the waste managers, because this trash has to be treated with care. No, it's not easy. It's not a valuable material. Nobody likes it. So we look for waste managers willing to take our baby. No, and of course the authorities. Yeah, okay, the authorities, and of course the supporters. So that's all. Yes,
thank you. Thank you so much, Irene. I would like to say you have several questions in the chat already. One of them is from our next presenter. So I'm just going to segue into Philip Ehrhorn's presentation. And after Philip's presentation, then we'll have a round of questions and answers with all of you here.
Okay.
Hello, Philip.
Hi, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm jumping ahead. Yes, I won't waste any time. My name is Philip Ehrhorn. I'm one of the co-founders and the CTO of the Great Bubble Barrier. And I think I unfortunately couldn't join the whole seminar so far. But what we're talking about, I think everyone is aware that the plastic problem in our oceans is huge, and not only in our oceans. For us, the main important part is, if you look at the plastic that's in our oceans, around 2/3, or we estimate that around 2/3 are traveling there through rivers and canals. So for us, the approach was, if the problem is already in the water, if we already can't prevent it's in the water, shouldn't we be better catching it in rivers closer to the source before it actually gets a chance to end up in the ocean? So we came up with a drastic solution, basically, which doesn't hinder the passing of ships or wildlife, as well as has an effect over the whole width and depth of the river. So how do we do that? Basically, we use air, nothing but air. We place a perforated tube diagonally on the bottom of the river or the canal, and we pump air through it. And what that does is it creates an uplift stream, which can take up suspended plastic to the surface. And then together with the natural flow of the river, the trash will be guided to the side and then into an allocated catchment system, which will retain the waste until it's removed from the water. What this looks like in real life is then like this. This is our first permanent system in Amsterdam, the Netherlands.
I'm sorry, Philip, you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, maybe it's because is it showing now?
No.
Was I not sharing at all?
No,
oh.
Not yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
now you are. There we go.
I'm so sorry. Okay, so I wasn't sharing the whole time. Okay, quick, you know the story. It's a bubble curtain. We use air bubbles to direct plastic to the surface, and then at the surface, together with the natural flow of the river towards the side into the catchment system. Much more simpler. If you look at this image, this is an actual drone image of the system in Amsterdam. You would see basically the water come from the bottom of your screen, and it flows towards the big canal here, which ultimately ends up in the North Sea, a couple of 100 meters downstream. We place them where? We specifically place these, or we prefer to place them in densely populated areas where we expect the majority of the plastic waste to enter the waterways. This way we can have smaller systems with a much higher concentration of plastics. And also you see it here as well with the bridge. We have good visibility. We have every day people stopping and reading the information signs, and we can create awareness and tackle the problem close to the source. And this is something that's really important for us. Bubble barriers, we don't see them just as a technical solution to capture plastics and then everything is fine. We see them as monitoring tools for the first time it's possible to see what trash travels through our rivers and would otherwise just go by unseen and would be anonymously in the ocean. We're working together with local NGOs to have a look at the plastic that and collect data, what kind of trash and what the sources are. We're going to make these informations open source, so we hope to also promote additional measures and new policies, because if you want to tackle the problem further upstream, you need to have proof for the effects of your measures, and we believe we can help with our bubble barrier. A little bit more towards microplastics and where the microplastics come in. For us, the main target is, of course, the bigger pieces, and we want to catch plastic before it actually gets the chance to break down into smaller pieces further down in its pollution career, basically. But we also see that we're not only catching basically microplastic before it becomes microplastic, but also actual microplastic. And if I talk about that, I'm talking about the literature microplastic amount, so 5 millimeter to 1 millimeter. Everything is smaller. We don't know yet, and we're not going to claim anything about the non-visible microplastics, basically. So this is a nice collection from last year after New Year's. You can see that with all the wooden rocket, not sure what you call it. But if you look closer, you will see that you have a lot of smaller microplastics pieces, sometimes sticking to the larger pieces, but also just under the surface that we wouldn't see. So in Amsterdam right now, we're working together with the Plastic Soup Foundation, where we're sorting out amounts of that trash to really have concrete data on what do we actually have in there. Unfortunately, this was put on hold because of the ongoing pandemic, but we're hoping to pick it up again later this year so that we can continue, not only stopping the plastic, but provide data for researchers, scientists, policymakers, and to engage new measures. So what we do as well, we do a little a media campaign around the Catch of the Month series where we highlight certain plastic topics that the system is catching in Amsterdam, and to go a little bit into where it's coming from and what we could maybe do about it. So if you're keen to follow us on social media, you can have a look at that. I'll keep it very short. Little image from not too long ago. Microplastics, definitely stuff that nightmares are made of. You sometimes won't believe what kind of things we're catching there. Last week we also had an old TV in the catchment system. It's sometimes quite shocking to see what would otherwise just flow off and would be gone. But hopefully, you know, without systems, we can make this was not supposed to be a video, a little dent into this problem. And then I'm already at the end. If you want to have a look at our one-pager, you can scan this QR code or visit our bubble barrier digitally on Google Street View. I think I can also quickly share a link directly in the chat for people to have a look. Thank you very much.
That would be great. Thank you, Philip. David, Irene, and Philip, and Hanna-Kaisa, please. We are having a short round of questions. I saw that Hanna had already answered a question in the chat very proactively. So that's good. And I have a little bit of an open question posted here by Talita, saying that can the pandemic like COVID-19 be related to the ecological imbalance caused by microplastics in the environment? It's a bit of an open-ended question. I don't know if anybody feels that there is a direct relation.
If I can pick it up, I don't know. From my feeling about plastic pollution, I think there's a lot of problems we can probably connect to it in the future. I would not really go into the pandemic. I think it's still very early to say what are the exact causes and reasons. Of course, one of is globalization and what humans do generally on Earth. I would say connecting to pandemic would be a bit far-fetched. I think the first estimations are going more in the animal trade. Perfect.
There's one question directed to you, Philip, from Martin Thiel, the other presenter before. What do you do with the natural debris captured together with the plastic debris in your system?
It's generally, and we have to be brutally honest about this, we have no control always where the plastic goes and the trash goes. So we supply the system to a client basically at the end of the day, which are governmental institutions. And they usually have their waste processing in place. We can unfortunately not take care of the whole processing. And at the moment, recycling of that material that's in there is absolutely, I'm not sure who currently would put money into this because there's no return of investment on this. It costs you money and no one wants to spend money on that. And also what can you do afterwards with that without making, creating new materials that can be polluted. There is natural debris as well that we collect. And in natural river systems, this debris sometimes is very valuable and needs to stay in the river. The locations where we are now at are usually as polluted, or let's say have such a high organic load that's rather small, the impact. If we're talking about more of a natural river system, that's something we'll have to assess in the future. If we are more in a natural environment, absolutely. Also, if we have larger pieces, I don't know if a whole tree branch, like a large tree branch of multiple hundreds of kilos, I don't think we would capture that. So that would definitely stay in the river.
Thank you very much. There's another question to Irene from Ecoalf. How do you close the loop on your garments that are mixing fibers, like polyamide with elastane, that you promote on the website?
Yeah, currently Ecoalf is trying to do things better and better, but it's not perfect at all. And there are things, when the company began 10 years ago, the goal was doing garments from recycled materials, and that was. And now more and more the company is trying to work on the eco-conception from the cradle. So what currently are trying is to reduce the blending of materials to promote the post-consumer recycling, of course. It's currently working in some research and development projects to try to, I don't know how to say, but to divide the materials after the consumption, but we are aware that is better, much better if from the beginning it's not blended. About fall, Ecoalf is trying to focus on preventing the waste. Not only focusing in recycling the garment at the end of the lifespan. It's more like, okay, try to buy less, try to buy better, try to buy high quality products. To reduce this crazy consumption, and to focus on that, and above all also to participate in different thinking tanks, in different projects and initiatives related to the issue. But there is much more to do, of course.
Yeah, it always feels like there's so much to do. There is one more question, or there's two questions. One from Luis saying to Philippe, if do the bubbles not disturb marine life? And it's associated to a question from Martin Thiel, wondering how do small larvae, fish or shrimps react to the bubble barrier, if you've looked into that.
Yeah, I don't know, it's just a wording, but marine wildlife, of course, shouldn't be in the locations where we're at. So we're talking about aquatic wildlife, but not the less, of course, important. We are doing also in Amsterdam an environmental assessment, also the impact on fish we're having a look at. With the impact of the bubbles, we have one big side effect, which is we're putting in oxygen. So it's ambient air that we put into the water, and we can locally increase the amount of oxygen that's saturated in the waterways. We know that a lot of the locations we're looking at, they have a problem with low oxygen levels and eutrophication even sometimes. Nonetheless, every location will be different. Every location will have its own unique ecosystem, and that's something we're going to have to monitor with every project and be aware of. It's definitely high on the list. So far, we know that air bubbles have been trying to use it to deter fish for a long time, and they're failing. So that's good for us. But unfortunately, most studies are looking at how can we deter them. So they're not really reporting on how not to deter them. They're doing projects with like 6 rows of bubble curtains in a row with much larger air volumes, and they're still not succeeding. And we have one single line of very fine air bubbles that we're quite confident that the impact will be minimal. But as I said, we're going to keep assessing it.
I see most of the questions are directed to Philip. There is another one. Are you able to catch the entire plastic litter from the canals?
No, we're not. We have seen in previous tests that we can catch around 86% of our test material under varying weather conditions, basically. As I said, we bring up plastic from suspension onto the surface, but there's also plastic that is already sunken and it's more like tumbling over the bottom. About that, we don't know too much yet. And in general, the sampling of how much you're catching versus how much is still going through is very tricky, because for that we would have to, behind the bubble barrier, have a very fine mesh that takes out everything basically. But the good thing about the bubble curtain is that it doesn't deter fish and also obstruct ship traffic. And to actually test it very thoroughly, we would have to obstruct the ship traffic. So it's a bit of a tricky part. And again, coming back to monitoring, we're now looking at microplastic monitoring, but in general, we're still missing good monitoring methods to actually see how much trash we have. And as I said, that's another approach we're hoping to do here, that with the bubble barrier, it's actually the first time we can do long-term monitoring about the discharge of plastics that are going through our rivers, because I think a lot of the plastic is just going by unseen.
I think and the stuff that David, for example, or Martin before presented, where citizen involvement in measuring are very, very useful in this case. I'm going to ask Philip to look into the chat and respond physically in the chat or typing. And I wanted to raise a question to Hanna-Kaisa, sorry, from ECA. I know it might not be ECA's exact range of activity, but since you have been proposing regulations or directives for the European Commission, do you see these sort of initiatives like the Upcycling the Oceans or the bubble barriers something that could also go in that line of enforcement, or kind of like suggested as a good practice at the EU level?
Yes, I think definitely we are very interested in all technologies and ideas that people have or companies have, and those we hope to hear from during the consultation. So we have the 6-month consultation after we kind of submit the proposal, where we normally get these kind of we get information on what's available in the market, because of course we don't know what's out there, all the different kinds of ideas. So yes, definitely this would be interesting, or would have been interesting in the consultation period. I remember, for example, that we got for the rubber granules, for example, we got information about these granule catchers during the consultation that I believe at least one of the Finnish companies has developed to put into the sewage entry of the sewage to catch the granules before they go into the water.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Now I'm not sure I've covered all the questions, to be honest, but thank you very much for the presentation. We have some minutes now as a break. I know I need it, so I'll catch up here again at 5. Thank you very much for your presentations and sharing the links. Everything that can be shared here will be made available on the project webpage anyway. So we'll hope to get your input there.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. We start again at 5 for the next block of microplastics counterculture.